ocean lovers, welcome to episode number 3 of Dive Stories, brought to you by PADI, helping millions around the world to seek adventure and save the ocean. I'm your host, Ocean Allison, and on today's episode, I'm chatting with Alex Rendell. Alex is a Thai actor and conservationist and the co-founder of Environmental Education Center Thailand. During this episode, Alex shares some of his favorite diving adventures in Thailand and beyond, his passion for teaching conservation above and below the surface, and the responsibility he feels to use his platform to bring environmentalism to the mainstream. All that and more coming right up. Thanks for being here. You're listening to Dive Stories. We bring the underwater world to you through in-depth conversations with inspiring divers from around the globe. Thanks for diving in with us as we seek adventure and save the ocean. Happy listening and happy diving. Today's Dive Stories guest is Thai actor and conservationist Alex Rendell. Alex, welcome to Dive Stories, and thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me to be on this podcast.
So, Alex, we're actually going to start this podcast out by diving right into what we call the Dive 5. And at the start of each episode, I ask our guests 5 rapid-fire questions about their experience as a diver and an ocean lover. So are you ready to answer the Dive 5, Alex?
Yes, I am ready.
Okay, perfect. So number 1, first place you took a breath underwater.
The Maldives.
Number 2, in one word, how does diving make you feel?
Peaceful.
Number 3, your favorite ocean animal.
I'd say dugongs.
Number 4, in one word, what does the ocean mean to you?
Everything.
And number 5, who is an environmentalist that inspires you?
I'd say Alongkot Chukeo. He's my professor. He's my teacher. He's the one who taught me, so I'll give it to him.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Alex, for answering the Dive 5. Now, we're going to get a little more in-depth by jumping right into the core of this interview. So as a PADI ambassador diver and an open water scuba instructor, you're clearly passionate about diving and sharing the underwater world with others. What initially prompted you to become a PADI diver in the first place?
It's always been on my mind as a kid. Like growing up, I've always known about scuba diving and always thought when the time was right, I would do it. But when I was younger, I was playing a lot of football. I'm also part of the entertainment industry. So I've been acting since I was very, very young, since I was 8 years old. So there wasn't much opportunity. But once I graduated from university, I took like a grad trip to the Maldives. And that was the first time I had experienced the underwater world. So after that, I came back and I took the course. I did my first dive trip. And I knew at the time that I don't know how, but I knew that my life was going to come into this direction one way or another. I mean, the feeling was quite strong very early on that whatever I do, it's going to be something to do with diving in the near future.
And so what do you love about diving specifically in your home country of Thailand?
Well, Thailand is a very good country in terms of diving. I think there's the most amazing dive sites, the most variety. You could do all kinds of diving, landscape diving, marine life. Some people like the nudies, all the small little things. And I think it's a country that has everything that has to do with diving. You could dive throughout the whole season. There's 2 sides of the ocean. So when one is off, the other one is on high season. The facilities that we have, our boats are amazing. The services, I mean, it's just a great country to be in if you like scuba diving.
In Thailand, what are some of your personal favorite dive sites?
Favorite has to be Koh Ha, which is in Koh Lanta, and also the Similan Islands, of course. The Similans is where I did my first proper liveaboard, and I love that place so much. But my number one place that I enjoyed the most was a very random dive site that I don't think many people have actually been, which is a dive site just off the coast of Thai Muang National Park, which is around, I think, 60 to 80 kilometers away from Phuket. And the reason is that it's a coral line that I think is around 4 to 5 kilometers long. It's not too far away from shore. So it's an area where researchers would go diving to conserve leatherback sea turtles, because that is where the leatherback sea turtles come up and lay their eggs. It's like the only beach left that we've had leatherbacks the last many years. So it was very interesting to see how untouched it was. I mean, the water wasn't quite as blue as the simulants. It wasn't quite as pretty, but just the feeling of being in a dive site where not many people have been, and to see how much life was in that area. And it was just like, it's probably my number one dive site for sure.
Yeah, wow. That definitely sounds like a really special place to dive. Now, speaking of conservation and your love and passion for conservation, in 2015, you co-founded Environmental Education Center Thailand, which provides direct environmental education to children from the forest to the sea. And to my understanding, to date, Environmental Education Center Thailand has educated more than 10,000 students, which is just totally amazing. What I want to ask you about Environmental Education Center Thailand is, what is the philosophy behind your organization's core slogan, "Let nature be your classroom"?
Well, there's actually a model. So environmental education, like a lot of people that I've met along the way had the perception that that was us, that we made it up, but it wasn't actually us. It's actually a legit model that researchers or professors have invented many years ago. So we brought that model and then we applied it into our organization. So the model is just environmental education for the environment, environmental education from the environment, and environmental education in the environment. And when these 3 points come together, we get the changes in attitudes and we get the changes in the understanding. And we believe that that is the sustainable form of conservation, because we're trying to change the way that people think rather than keep promoting them to do this and to do that. So we're trying to educate kids. And the way that we do this, we believe that if the knowledge is there and if the process is there, it's not a one-time off kind of thing. It's more of an education process. There's orientations, there's exams, there's class, there's laboratory sessions, and then we give them a certificate at the end. And we have over 20 different courses, different curriculums, which we have come up with in-house. And we are an education center that aims to educate the society of Thailand on all environmental concerns, with the belief that we think that if we use nature as our classroom, it brings a sentimental value to all of our students, and that sentimental value will transform into inspiration or a motivation for them to conserve. And we believe that by starting up with children, originally I thought that it was going to be a long-term process before we actually see some change. Like, the purpose of it for the long term is that we think that these kids will grow up and have an environmental concern and an environmental heart. So whatever they do, whoever they work for, whatever business they may do or organization they may collaborate with, they will always have that environmental heart in them, which I think that is what will cause a big change into society, into the behavior of society in the long term. And I mean, that originally was the plan, but then we realized that we didn't have to wait that long to see that, because now we have children, we have students going back into their schools and building eco-friendly communities. They're going home and they're telling their parents, you can't do this, you can't do that. We have like some students that have first come with their older sister, and they were just a baby at the time. And now once he turns 3.5 years old, his parents sent me a video clip of him in front of his school assembly just talking about sea turtles. So there's so many different cases, so many different success stories that we are very proud of. We have students who are already applying to becoming marine biologists, to work in the world of sustainability. We have kids that, because of our platform, they want to work for the United Nations, they want to work for Greenpeace, and they're already putting this idea into their IB programs, their extended essays where they have to write. We facilitate the research side for them. So they're coming scuba diving with us to find information or to do some sort of research which will help with whatever essay they are writing. They're already applying to universities that are in this form. So my point is that these kids are already planning to work in this industry because of the different activities that they've been done. We have some kids that have started since the age of like 5. At the moment, they're like 10, they're 11. Some have started at 10, they did their junior open waters, and now they're 15, which means that they're already in the stage of life where they have to choose their future. And quite a good number are actually choosing to become environmentalists as a career, which is really cool in my point of view.
It's definitely inspiring, and clearly that concept of let nature be your classroom and, environmental education, like you were saying, it's clearly inspiring them, which is inspiring you. And it seems like it's probably a cycle that's going to continue and be sustainable.
Definitely.
So you touched on this a little bit with scuba diving. But yeah, can you just walk us through what sort of activities does Environmental Education Center Thailand share the underwater world with campers?
Well, there's a lot of scuba diving camps. It actually plays quite a big part because the students tend to love it more than any other activity we have. Every kid loves diving. Every single kid loves diving. We have what we call a junior marine camp. Junior Marine Camp, we teach snorkeling for young children below the ages of 10. We teach them in a swimming pool first, and then we teach them about marine life. We have fish identification. They go snorkeling with their instructor. We give them tasks, like suppose we tell them some of the camps, like you have to study on lionfish and you have to understand more about lionfish. So you have to go and find the lionfish, and then you have to come back and present what kind of behavior you had witnessed in your snorkeling sessions. This is as an example. And once they become older, 8 years old to 10 years old, we have bubble making programs in the swimming pool. And at 10 years old to 15 year olds, we start certify them to become junior open waters. But in the junior open water courses, we have science classes in the open water programs as well. Our point is that we're using scuba diving as an educational tool. We try to tell them that if you come to EEC, it's not only about recreational diving, but it's a tool for you to understand the underwater world. So before you go down into the underwater world, you have to understand it in a scientific approach. So that's what we do. So every student that is certified in our open water has done some sort of scientific experiment with salt water.
It's so great to hear that all the students love diving so much, and the marine science that you're embedding into the programs just sounds really impactful. But so once they're certified divers, what sort of conservation activities are the students able to participate in?
Once they get certified, we have courses. We have Save the Dugong courses. So like an example of Save the Dugong courses, like we take them into the seagrass areas. Sometimes they're only diving at like 1.5 meters. But the point is not for them to go deep. Point is not for them to go and see the most beautiful places, dive sites in the world. But the point of it is for them to be able to be underwater for a good 20 to 30 minutes, identifying the different seagrasses that are in the area to show how diverse it is, and finding a management scheme to save the dugongs and looking after its habitat. We have a lot of courses like the whale shark courses. We once took them in Koh Lanta. It's quite a known habitat for the whale sharks. We've brought them diving there. We did a lot of science work regarding planktons and the mangrove forest areas. We do a lot of study there because that's where the planktons are being produced. We've had them interview the local people in Koh Lanta, the local dive shops, because whale sharks play a big part in the tourism industry in Koh Lanta. We've had marine experts coming and doing lectures on them. It's more like the way that we're doing it is more about being involved with a wider variety of people. We haven't really done anything straight with the actual whale shark, but it's more about protecting the habitat and understanding what would need to be taken into account if we were to protect the whale sharks. We've had this project called Fighting Extinction. It's a project where there was 5 nearly extinct animals in Thailand, and we've got 25 children, and we separated them into 5 different groups, 5 per one animal. And the idea was for them to be able to go scuba diving and do research that they will bring back, and then they will present in front of 300 people in the center of Bangkok. It was an 8-month program. So we took them to the different habitats of the 5 animals. We had them interview the local people, the local organizations, the local NGOs, and we had them write up a smaller scale thesis. And we also used that to promote conservation in Thailand as well. So, I mean, we do so much.
Yeah, wow. It sounds like you and your team at EEC Thailand are really providing an amazing variety of conservation-focused activities to your students. So thank you for sharing some amazing examples. Like you mentioned before, you've been an actor since you were young, and with that, you've really had a lifetime of being a public figure. How has that given you the skills to speak out in support of the conservation of nature above and below the surface in Thailand and beyond?
Well, when I first started, I didn't realize as how much actors or myself as an actor, how much media that I was in control of that could actually make a change. I always thought social media was just something that you just post about your friends on Facebook after going out or something. I never really took it seriously back in like 10 years ago. But when I started, my first real project was bringing an elephant from down south, like adopting an elephant and putting it on social media and raising funds to bring this elephant and rescuing him, basically. And I didn't think that in 1 week I would be able to raise that much. I didn't think that people would be that involved. And I didn't think that all the interviews that I was doing and all the acting that I was doing would play such a big part in it. And then I realized that there are people that have been working in this field for like 20, 30 years. They have dedicated their whole lives to one animal, one species. And I just come along and I post one thing and then there's a big impact. I mean, I'm not proud of it, but that's the truth. And so now I position myself as the middleman between society and conservationists, basically. So I see a lot of conservationists work in their field of work, and I really appreciate what they do. So my job is to be able to communicate their good work and transform it into a language that's more easy to understand, not so scientific, and communicate it to the society and try to get the society involved in conservation. So in these last 7 years or 8 years that I've actually been involved in conservation, I work a lot as a public speaker. So and I see that I have the ability to attract people, just like how singers would have the ability to get on stage and sing in front of a lot of people, and people would sing along and listen to them. It's kind of the same idea, although it's not to that extent. But wherever I go, wherever I come onto stage, people, as they would know me as an actor, they would listen to what I have to say. So whatever I say may cause some sort of impact towards them, which I feel that I am very lucky to have this. And I'm just trying to use it to help people, to help other people with their work, and definitely to inspire other people for them to want to be involved in conservation. And that's pretty much my job. Even with the students, like, I guess they look up to me, some of them, and they feel like they want to do what he does. And it's very cool. It's very touching. Basically, I'm just trying to use my social status as a tool to educate other people.
It's an amazing sort of power, and it seems as though you're looking at it as a responsibility to, do something great with it that's, even beyond yourself.
I do think that all actors in whatever country, not only in Thailand, but if they're working on screen and there's a million people watching them, and their social media, there's 10 million people following them. Whatever they post or whatever message that they are communicating, it does have an impact on society, and I think it is part of their responsibility to be responsible for whatever they say.
So
Yeah.
speaking of that, in 2019, you shared a viral social media campaign. I mean, it wasn't viral when you shared it, but it became viral about Miriam, an orphan baby dugong, which you said is your favorite ocean animal.
Yeah.
Why was it important to you to share that baby dugong story with the world?
Well, I did the Save the Dugong camp, and then it happened in Trang. And once we arrived at Trang, we were told that there was this baby dugong that the local people and the local authorities were looking after. They didn't even name him Mariam yet at the time. He wasn't famous at all yet. And then once we got there, we saw Mariam, and the kids loved it. I loved it. It was so cute. It was right by our boats. His back was like kept coming up and rubbing his back against our boat, and then the guys there said that that was him thinking that that was his mother, and the kids loved the dugong that they saw so much, and we were told that let's keep it down because we don't want people coming and we don't want it to be difficult to work because this is the first dugong in the world that is raised by humans basically, but living in the natural environment. It is the first case, and it's a very difficult case, and we were told to keep it low. So we told everyone in the group, don't post anything. We don't want to bring 100 people coming here. But once time went on, I think the local authorities started to realize that they needed support, and they needed the public to be aware of what was going on with the task that they were under. And they needed a lot of financial support. They need a lot of manpower to be involved. This was not going to be a small, easy, low-key task anymore. So that's when I came in, and then I shared it. And but she was already known in the field of conservation before I shared it, to be honest. And more people just found out about her that wasn't involved in conservation. So once that came up, then it became big news. Then she was a global superstar, basically. And I personally believe that conservation is all about public participation. It's never about one person just doing one thing. It's all about getting as much people involved into one thing as possible. And that's my thinking.
Amazing, amazing. Very well said. So, with the name of this podcast being Dive Stories, I have to ask, what is one of your most memorable dive stories?
Well, I would say that I was at the Komodo Islands last year
In Indonesia?
in Indonesia, yeah, which was probably the one of the greatest experiences I ever had. Because in Thailand, when you say drift dive, you're just drifting just a little bit, you know? You're just drifting like maybe 100 meters or something, like nothing too fast. And then we were in Indonesia, and then we went on this dive trip, and they said, we're going to take you to see manta rays at a cleaning station. But you're going to have to be careful because the water is very shallow. It's only like 8 to 10 meters. And once you go down, you're going to drift very, very far because that is where the currents, they just leave the currents, and then we're just going to go as a team. So I didn't think much about it. But once I went down there, the currents were so fast. I didn't think that that was normal. I didn't know that that was even allowed, but I saw so many manta rays, and it was just a complete new experience, and managed to see a manta really close and really see what he was doing and why he was there in the cleaning station. So that was a very great experience. And the whole trip of being in Indonesia, because I'm actually born in Indonesia, and to be able to see that, to stay there for 5 days on a boat and go diving and see sharks at 28 meters down was probably my best experience of scuba diving, 100%.
Awesome. That sounds like a seriously epic dive adventure.
Yeah, it's really cool there.
So to wrap up, one last question. When it comes to a healthy and sustainable future for Thailand's people and natural environment above and below the surface, what gives you hope looking forward?
If we were to look back when I first started 7, 8 years ago, anything that had to do with the environment was never mainstream media. It was never a national agenda. It was never something that people would pay attention to. I remember at around 6, 7 years ago, a manatee was on the front page of the newspaper, but the news was about a dugong. So it shows that the level of understanding is not at the level where it should be. But now it's a completely different story. Everyone is sharing it on their media. Every organization, all the big corporates are using environmental conservation as part of their social responsibility. They are doing less of just donating money, but doing more of action. And once these big corporates are involved, society is more involved. And the public of Thailand are very aware. And we have a lot of pollution problems right now in Thailand. So it's becoming something that has triggered Thai people to stand up and be more involved in. And now, I don't know if it's just me, but everywhere I look, my friends, the company I work for, even the set that I turn up to, they're zero plastic already. So my point is that everyone around me is contributing to sustainability one way or another. And to see the younger generation, like when I was in high school, I remember thinking that environmental management and design technology were my choices. And I remember thinking that, and business studies, I chose business studies, but I remember thinking that environmental management was the least most exciting thing, because why would someone want to do that? That was my thinking at the time. But now the younger generation have a mindset where it's cool to conserve. It's cool to go diving. It's cool to not use single-use plastic. It's the change in the mindset of the newer generation. So I think that it is not the era where we should point fingers and say, oh, 10 years ago, you did this wrong. 10 years ago, you did that wrong. I mean, I think that's a waste of time if we were doing that. But it is the era where the newer generation are going to have to find different innovations and different approaches for our future, which I think is actually in good hands. Some may say it's too late. Some may say the world has already been damaged. But at the same time, I personally believe that humans will always find a way to survive. Humans will always find alternatives, even though something has already been damaged. That's development and that's the future. And I think that the KPI of many, many things, whether it's corporates or the public or anyone, the indicator of being successful is how much you contribute to conservation in the next century or so. So I think that we have a great, great future ahead of us in terms of conservation, definitely.
Well, that's absolutely incredible to hear. It definitely gives me hope, and my guess is that our listeners are feeling hopeful as well. So, Alex, on behalf of our global community of PADI divers and ocean lovers, thank you for using your platform to connect people of all ages with the importance of conserving Thailand's natural ecosystems above and below the surface. And thank you so much for joining us on Dive Stories.
Thank you. Thank you so much for everything. And thank you for putting me on this podcast. It's really a great honor.
Thanks for tuning in to Dive Stories. You've just heard Alex Rendell, Thai actor and conservationist and co-founder of Environmental Education Center Thailand. To learn more, find Alex on social media at Alex Rendell and visit eecthailand.com. Inspired to connect with the ocean further? With PADI e-learning, you can start your next dive adventure right now from the comfort of your own home. E-learning allows you to complete the online portion first, and then connect at any time with a PADI dive center or resort to complete your in-water training. Whether you're just starting or continuing your diving journey, PADI e-learning is an ideal way to jumpstart your next underwater adventure. This has been Dive Stories, brought to you by PADI, Seek Adventure, Save the Ocean. If you love the ocean and enjoyed this podcast episode, please subscribe to Dive Stories in your podcast app and feel free to leave a review. Follow PADI on social media and head to PADI.com to join our community of torchbearers working together to seek adventure and save the ocean. I'm your host, Ocean Allison. Happy diving!